أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وله الحمد في الآخرة وهو الحكيم الخبير والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث إلى كافة الورى بشيرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى أهل بيته أئمة الهدى ومصابيح الدجى الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا
اللهم صل على محمد
أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد كان في قصصهم عبرة لأولي الألباب صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Last night I mentioned that what makes the holy month of Ramadan so special is the fact that it is associated with the Holy Quran. In the famous verse that we recite in this holy month, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us very clearly that when He describes and defines Shahr Ramadan, He does so in its association with the Holy Quran, not with other things. Although these other things such as fasting, for example, they are extremely important and they have their own wisdom behind them, their own philosophy behind them, and they have enormous impact for us and for individuals in the community. But on top of everything that is ordained for us to do in this holy month is the association that we must have with the Holy Quran. For this is how Allah defines this month in the Quran Himself. Then from that we ask ourselves this question that, okay, what makes this receptacle so special? It is because the receptacle of time, the container of time that is the month of Ramadan, had something special delivered in it. It had something special revealed in it, and that is the Quran. So when the holy month became inseparable from the Quran, the holy month took on a more valuable status for it. It was a regular month, but because the Quran was revealed in it, that container became much more valuable. So from this we led to this conclusion that what about us? We ourselves have our own personal containers, our own personal receptacles, and that is our hearts and our souls. And therefore, if we want to also increase in value, we must receive the Quran in our hearts, in our souls, in the same way that the holy month became more valuable because of what was placed in it. We also, inshallah, will become more valuable by what is placed in our hearts, meaning the teachings of the Quran, inshallah. So from this we said that for the rest of these lectures we will build on this whole concept of bringing the Quran into our lives and becoming more worthy as a result. And we said that we'll do that by looking at the verses that relate to the stories of the past prophets as mentioned in the Quran. So inshallah, we will be examining these wonderful stories and seeing how we can apply the teachings from them to our daily lives. So I have titled this whole lecture series, Past Prophets, Modern Challenges. Because we'll be looking at the prophets that came before Rasulul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then we will draw inspiration from them. We will derive lessons from them, and then apply them to some of the common issues and problems that we face on a daily basis. So therefore, past prophets, modern challenges. And inshallah, this is something that I would like to develop as we go along in these nights of this holy month of Ramadan. It is a topic that I have been researching and lecturing on for about a year now. But because there are around 26 prophets mentioned by name in the Holy Quran, and because there are multiple stories associated with many of these prophets, there are always new angles to explore and new treasures to find as well. So although this has been a very interesting and a very important topic for me to develop over the last year or so, because there are so many prophets, like I said, around 26, each one or many of them having multiple stories relating to them, there's always going to be new dimensions that we can explore and brilliant lessons that we can apply to our lives. So now, for those of you who are interested in looking at the stories of past prophets, I would like to recommend a very good book to you all, and that is a book called God's Emissaries. It's by a very good friend of mine. We were in Qum together for many years. His name is Shaykh Rizwan Aristu, and it is published by Imam. This is a very good book that's available in English about the stories of the past prophets. But if any of you would like to know about other books in Persian or in Arabic, then certainly I can suggest them to you as well. So inshallah, tonight we will begin our discussion by looking at the first prophet in this series of lectures. And throughout the course of tonight's lecture, I will attempt to answer the following 5 questions. First of all, why is it so important to examine the stories of the prophets mentioned in the Quran? Secondly, what do the Quran and the Hadith tell us about Nabi Saleh ala nabiyyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam? Thirdly, what is the difference between jealousy and envy on the one hand, and what we call in Arabic hasad and ghibta on the other? Fourthly, what effect does hasad have on us? And finally, what are the causes of hasad? And then tomorrow, inshallah, we will complete our discussion on this whole topic of hasad by developing some other areas relating to this matter. In particular, we'll be looking at how we can remove hasad from our hearts and what are the remedies of it, together with some other aspects of this whole area. Inshallah, we will begin our examination of this topic with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So with regard to the first question, why is it so important to examine the stories of the prophets mentioned in the Quran? For this, again, as we have been doing so far, we will turn to the Quran. In the verse that I recited at the beginning of this lecture, it is verse number 111 of Surah Yusuf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us exactly why we must study the past prophets and their stories. He says, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. This means that in their stories, meaning the accounts of the prophets, there is ibrah. There are morals and lessons. For who? For the ulil albab, those who possess intellect. So, for us, we must examine these accounts, these stories, and inshallah derive ibrah, derive lessons and morals from their stories. And this is because the prophets themselves are exemplars for us. They are role models for us. They display in their character sublime attributes which we must aspire to. In fact, the prophets themselves, they are portrayed in the Quran in such moving ways. They are inspirations for us. Their stories move us and they inspire us. Because we see in their stories, for example, that they went through so many trials and tribulations. But despite all of these trials and tribulations, they always remain steadfast. They always remain committed to the message of spreading the teachings of Allah to their people. Even they were abused, they were physically harmed. We'll see some of these examples on the nights that will follow, inshallah. But still they never gave up. So for us, these are really a source of inspiration to exemplify and to follow in our lifestyle. In fact, when we read or we hear about these stories, we should ask ourselves that, how can I be like this prophet? And we should also ask ourselves with regards to their enemies and those who went against them, that what must I change in my life so that I am not like those people who went against this prophet. So inshallah, as I go through these stories, let's all of us, myself first and foremost, with regard to all of these pieces of advice, I always try to ask myself in the first instance that what must I do in my lifestyle so that I become more like this prophet that we are talking about? And what must I change in my lifestyle so I am not like those who are going against the prophet? Inshallah, this will enable us to get that ibrah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to in this verse. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So now, once we have seen this, we can now look at the second question that I asked earlier, and that is, what does the Quran and also the traditions tell us about this great prophet Nabi Saleh? Well, to give us an overview and just to put the whole story in context, I'll just mention a few basic facts about all the prophets that we are examining in these nights of this holy month of Ramadan. So Nabi Saleh, he was from among the people of Thamud. Now the Thamud were the descendants of Nabi Nuh, ala nabiyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam. And they lived in an area of northwestern Arabia. In today's present time, it is the area near Tabuk in Saudi Arabia. Now, the Thamud, they built this city called Hijr, which I'm sure you will have heard of from the Quran and from du'as and the ahadith. The city of Hijr was the most wonderful of cities. This is because they had actually built the city deep into the sandstone mountains. Just imagine, a city carved into the mountains themselves. It was a spectacular city. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed them with this ability to make this wonderful city inside the mountains, but not just that. On top of everything, He had blessed them with an area around this city which was really beautiful in its natural inhabitant, in its natural beauty. It gave the people of Thamud so much that they could benefit from. Amongst these blessings were a number of springs. So they had all of this natural beauty surrounding them. They had flowing springs that they could utilize for themselves and also for their crops. They were blessed with all of this, and so their crops were very abundant and also very high in quality. However, unfortunately, gradually over the years, the Thamud, they began to become ungrateful of all of these blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They started going after their whims and desires, and they began to engage in idol worship. we are told they worship 70 idols. So now, in this situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appoints Nabi Saleh to be their prophet for the people of Thamud. So now, Nabi Saleh, when he was appointed their prophet, he was only 16 years of age. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses him with a number of miracles to demonstrate in front of the people so that he can substantiate his claim that he is a prophet. He displays his miracles, but the vast majority of them, they reject his message. So now, when they reject his message, this is where, inshallah, now we're going to tie it with the whole concept of jealousy. We read in the verses that actually the cause of their rejection was jealousy. It was hasad. And we'll discuss what hasad is and jealousy and envy and ghibta in a few moments' time. The verse in question that tells us the cause of their enmity towards Nabi Saleh is in Surah Qamar, verse number 25. In this verse, the people of Thamud, we are told, they talk about why they reject this message. أَأُلْقِيَ الذِّكْرُ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ بَيْنِنَا بَلْ هُوَ كَذَّابٌ أَشِرٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that this is what happened. Allah tells us that they are saying, has the reminder been sent to him at the expense of all of us? At the exclusion of all of us? Rather, he is kadhabun ashir, meaning he is an arrogant liar. So what is happening here, my brothers and sisters? They are saying that why was he chosen over us? This is hasad. Why did Allah send the dhikr, the reminder to him at the expense of us? And in fact, isn't this something that resonates with all of us at some time or the other in our lives? Why him, not me? Why her, not me? This is something that Allah is talking about in the Quran. These people, they rejected the message because of hasad. And later on we'll see some other detrimental effects of hasad and jealousy. It causes somebody to become totally blind to the truth. Now, let's develop this further and look at the third question that I posed at the beginning of this lecture. What is, and we'll come back to this verse later on, and inshallah we'll develop it further. But for now, let's get a proper understanding of what hasad is, and ghibta, and also jealousy and envy. What is the difference between these? When I was looking at some popular dictionaries in order to get a good understanding of jealousy and envy and what the difference is. Because often people will use them interchangeably. Sometimes they will use the word envy when they mean jealousy. Sometimes they'll use the word jealousy when they mean envy. But there is a difference. In the English language, when we look at these dictionaries, we are told that jealousy is when somebody has resentment, they feel bitter towards someone because of that person's possessions, that person's achievements, or that person's perceived advantages. So this person who has envy, the hasid, who has jealousy, the hasid, he has resentment for that person. He feels bitter towards that person because of what that person has. So what is envy then? Envy is actually desiring something desirable that somebody else has. So the difference is like this. Let me put it in the form of an example. Let's say somebody is better than you at something. Your school friend, or perhaps a work colleague, somebody you know. They happen to be better than you at one particular thing. Let's say it's their ability to pick up things, their ability to learn, they are able to learn much quicker than you. It happens. Now, what is jealousy and what is envy? Jealousy is looking at that person and resenting that person, having bitterness towards that person because of their ability to pick things up fast. What is envy? Envy is desiring to also pick up the ability or the learning ability very quickly. So this envy is just wanting to have what somebody else has without them losing it, without having any resentment towards that person. But jealousy is when you have resentment as well. You have this bitterness towards that person. Why does that person, why does Ahmed, why does Zainab have all of these friends on Facebook? Is that jealousy or envy? If you have bitterness towards Ahmed or Zainab because of all their friends, because of that post that had so many likes, that's jealousy. But if you just want the same number of likes, the same number of friends, or even more than Ahmed and Zainab, but you don't have bitterness, you don't have any type of resentment towards them, that is envy. So now we've understood the difference between jealousy and envy. What is hasad and what is ghibta? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So in ilmul akhlaq, which is the field of knowledge that examines Islamic morals and ethics, we are told that hasad has a very specific definition. It is a little bit different to what we have just discussed with regards to jealousy. Usually we translate hasad as jealousy, right? And that's fine because it is the nearest English word to it. But there is an important difference to bear in mind as well. And that difference is, with hasad, the person wants that blessing to be removed from them. This is what makes it much more dangerous than just simple envy. Envy was just having resentment and bitterness towards that person. But hasad is now you want that thing to be removed from them. In Arabic they call it zawalun ni'mah. Wanting that thing to no longer belong to that person. Now, what is ghibta? Ghibta is often associated with hasad, but there's a very fundamental difference between the two. Ghibta is when you admire or when you desire a quality that somebody else has. So what is the difference here? Now, let's take that Facebook example. Ahmed has so many friends, but if I have hasad, I want those friends to be either his enemies or I want him to lose those friends. I want them to befriend him. So that is hasad. But what is ghibta? Ghibta is I admire Hassan, I admire Zainab for having that post, for having all those friends. I don't want them to lose them, but I want also to have the same number of friends and likes as them, or even more. So it is me and them to have the blessing. Hasad is just I want them to lose that blessing. This is the big difference. Now, therefore, although we translate hasad as jealousy, and we must bear in mind there's this important difference of wanting that blessing to be taken away from them, with regards to ghibta, we should use the word admiration. This is the word that myself and my colleagues often use for this word ghibta. It is admiration. The nearest is envy in English, but we can't use envy for it because, like I said, envy and jealousy are often used interchangeably. And because they are used in that way, one for the other, if we call ghibta envy, it denotes a negative quality. And so we don't use envy for ghibta, rather we use admiration. We admire that person for this blessing that they have. So now that we have understood the difference, let's have a look at this beautiful tradition from Imam Jafar Sadiq salawatullah wa alayhi. He explains the difference between the two in these amazing words. He says, Al-mu'min yaghbitu wa la yahsud. A mu'min, a believer, admires what others have, and he is not jealous of what others have. Then the Imam turns it round. He says, Wal munafiq yahsud wa la yaghbit. A munafiq, unfortunately, a hypocrite, is he who is jealous of what people have. He does not admire what people have. So let's inshallah bear this in mind, and inshallah tomorrow I'll look at some of the remedies of hasad and how we can remove it from our hearts. But one thing that we should bear in mind at this stage is that let's inshallah inculcate this feeling of ghibta, of admiration for our fellow brothers and sisters, not a feeling of hasad. Because as the sixth holy Imam tells us, this is what mu'mineen do. They have ghibta, they don't have hasad. So what we can try and do is when we are feeling green-eyed towards someone because of what they possess, let's not feel jealous. Let's try to change it to ghibta and admiration for them and say, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, what Allah has blessed them with. And inshallah, this will be a sign of a mu'min. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So now let's look at the fourth question that we want to try and answer tonight. And that is, what are the effects of hasad? This will really help us to understand this vice, which is so destructive in terms of our spirituality even more. And it will set us up very nicely for tomorrow's discussion. What are the effects of hasad? Once we've understood this, we'll see exactly what hasad does to us when we have it. First effect of it is physical. I mean, the doctors who are amongst us, they will know better than I just did some basic research about the physical effects of hasad on a person. We are told by those in the medical profession that hasad increases one's blood pressure. It increases heart rate. Adrenaline levels rise. Also, our immunity is weakened. Now just imagine if somebody has hasad over a prolonged period of time, at a high level of it as well, then just can you imagine what physical detrimental effect it would have on that person? So we should bear this in mind. It is very negative for us physically. Not just that though, psychologically as well. It has many negative effects on us. We are told that hasad, when somebody is jealous, it raises that person's anxiety and it causes that person to be restless. That person doesn't have peace. He's constantly thinking about others rather than focusing on himself. Think about it, the last time we were jealous about someone, it really begins to have this psychological impact, especially if it's just fleeting, then it might be different. But if it's prolonged and it's at an intense level, then it really can have a psychological impact on us. Anxiety, restlessness. But don't just take it from me. Listen to the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He tells us the same thing. He says, La rahata li hasud. There's no raha, there's no peace, there's no rest, there's no tranquility for the hasud, for the person who is jealous of others. So let's also bear this in mind. Not just physical effect, but also it has psychological impact on our lives. The third effect that it has on us is spiritual. We want to rise towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we are told in the tradition from Rasul al-Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that hasad consumes faith just like fire consumes dry wood. Just bear this in mind. That hasad, it eats our faith just like fire eats dry wood. So how are we supposed to rise spiritually towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we are feeling so jealous about others? How are we supposed to make progress spiritually when we are being eaten up inside? Our faith, our iman is being consumed by this awful vice that we call hasad. But fourthly and finally, in terms of the effects, let's also draw upon the story of Nabi Saleh once more. Like I said, we'll be using the stories of the prophets to guide us in our daily problems and to, inshallah, make amend of these common ailments that we come across in our daily lives. So what happens in this story? Well, as I said, I'll come back to that verse in Surah Qamar, verse number 25. Ulqiya dhikr alay. They say that has the reminder been said to him, min baynina bal huwa kadhabun ashir. Rather, instead of it coming to us, it's being given to him at the expense of all of us. Then what do they say? They say that Nabi Saleh, he is an arrogant liar. So, what effect is this pointing to? This requires a little bit more contemplation, a little bit more thinking about what is happening in this verse. Inshallah, one of the key things that we will do in these lectures is tadabbur over the verses, gaining those deeper messages from the verses, extracting them, and then inshallah applying them in our lives. When they say that why has Allah chosen him over us, and they start calling him an arrogant liar, this tells us that when somebody is jealous, they actually have a distorted perspective on reality. How does this work? Why is it that when we feel jealous, we do not see the other person as they really are? We actually start looking for their bad points. We ignore their good points. In fact, often what we do is we start changing vices, we start changing virtues into vices. They might have so many good points, but we start looking at them in a negative light. Look at this verse once more. Who was Nabi Saleh? Like I mentioned earlier, he was from among the people of Thamud themselves. In another verse we are told that Allah describes him as their brother. Allah says that we sent Saleh, their brother, to them. So he's one of them. He knows their problems and he tries to guide them. He wants them to get better. He wants them to improve. He wants them to prosper in this life and in the hereafter. What do? Because of their jealousy, they start calling him names. They call him Kadhabun Ashir, an arrogant liar. Isn't this distorting their perspective on reality? Who was Nabi Saleh? He was someone with impeccable character. He grew up amongst them. In fact, in another verse, we are told in Surah Hud, verse number 62, how much they respected him. They actually wanted him to be their leader. They had high hopes in him. In this verse, we are told, قَالُوا يَا Saleh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quotes them as saying that, O Saleh, they refer to him. And they say to him that قَدْ كُنْتَ فِينَا مَرْجُوًا قَبْلَ هَذَا. Allahu Akbar, what a verse. They say that, oh Saleh, we had high hopes for you. You were marju for us, meaning you were a source of hope for us. We wanted you to be our leader before all of this. Meaning before you started preaching about one God and you started telling us to leave the idols, we had this great hope in you. So now, what is happening here? When we look at the Quran, we must look at it in this way, not in a piecemeal way. One verse here taken in isolation, one verse there taken in a piecemeal form. No, we must look at the Quran in a holistic way, tying all the verses together. So from Surah Hud, we learn that the people actually respected Nabi Saleh really highly. They wanted him to be their leader. But in Surah Qamar, they call him an arrogant liar. So this is telling us, when you put it together, that their whole perspective became distorted once they became jealous. Isn't this what we do sometimes? When we are jealous of others, we only look for their negative traits. We turn their virtues into vices. We certainly don't mention their virtues to other people. We'll never do that. So let's have a look at the example of Ahmad and Zainab again and Facebook. So now Ahmad or Zainab posts something up on Facebook. But because I am jealous of Ahmad and Zainab, I don't look at it for what it could really be. I say to myself, oh, look at him, look at her. They're just showing off. They just want to become more and more popular. Do I know the reality? Do I know the intention? Perhaps they posted that for a very good purpose. They wanted to do something very good. How do we know? But because we are jealous, we have a very distorted perspective on reality. So therefore, this is also one of the effects of hasad on us. The 4 effects we should bear in mind. It will help us overcome it. Physical, psychological, spiritual, and distorting reality itself. Sallallahu alaihi Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the fifth and final question that inshallah we want to try and answer tonight is with regard to hasad. What are the causes of it? The first cause of it is hatred. Because we hate that person, we are unable to separate their blessings from the person. We hate that person, so we become jealous of that person. Second cause is a feeling of superiority. Because we feel superior to that person, we don't want that person to rise. We want that blessing to be removed from them so that they are lower than us. We feel that they should not rise higher than us because we are arrogant. We have pride. We feel superior. Why should they rise? And we want that thing to be removed from them so that so that people, they don't see us as being inferior to them. Third cause is the opposite of the second one, and that is inferiority complex. Sometimes we feel so inferior because we feel that, oh, you know what, I'm unable to progress. I can't get higher. So now, when I see Ahmad and Zainab progressing, I don't like it. I feel envy, I feel jealous, and I want that to be removed from them so that they remain at that same level. And they don't progress because I feel I can't progress either. So why should they progress? Inferiority complex. The fourth reason is even deeper than all of these. And this is something that we must pay attention to. It's at a very deeper level. And I wonder how much we can develop this in our lives when we ponder and derive lessons from it. And that is a very wrong understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is this at a deeper level than the other three causes? It is because sometimes we do not understand Allah and His attributes. Who is Allah? When somebody feels hasad, they are actually questioning Allah's divine attributes of His adala, meaning His justice, of His wisdom, His hikmah, and His grace, His fadl. Why? Why are we actually questioning deep down when we are feeling envious? Or we are questioning Allah's wisdom, His justice, and His favor. Because when Allah has given to Ahmad and Zainab, hasn't He done it out of wisdom? Hasn't He done it out of justice? Doesn't Allah know best where to confer His favors? Who are we to question? Perhaps it's a test for them. And inshallah tomorrow we'll look at this in more detail. Don't just think that all blessings come without any baggage. No. Allah has given it to them, but it could be a test for them. Are they passing it or not? And what about us? It's also a test for us. How are we responding to the blessings of others? Are we passing that test or not? Are we questioning really Allah's wisdom, His justice, and His favor on others? That means we haven't understood Allah properly. But if we understand Allah, that Allah doesn't do anything without wisdom, without justice, without a good reason, then it becomes much easier for us to accept the blessings of others. We don't feel jealous. Because then we know that inshallah, Allah, just as He has the ability to give others, He can give me as well. And He can give me even more if I only pass my test. The test is twofold. For the people who have the blessings and for the people who don't have them. How are they going to react when they receive them? How are you going to react when you see those other people having these blessings? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
And in fact, I'll leave you with this final tradition from Rasulul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali.
He talks about the same thing, about not understanding Allah properly. He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed Musa ibn Imran, Nabi Musa ala nabiyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam. He says to him that, O son of Imran, don't do three things. And then he says that with the person who is jealous, he has two qualities. So don't do three things, and then he describes how the hasad person is. What are those three things? He says, don't be jealous of those things that I have conferred on people out of my favor. Second thing, he says, don't extend your glance at those things. Meaning don't covet them. Don't try to really want them and yearn for those things. And thirdly, don't pursue that in your heart. But then he says that the hasid, the one who does hasad, he says that he is displeased of my blessings. And then he says, the one who has hasad, he is averse to my allocation of my shares amongst my servants. I have allocated my favor and my share amongst my servants. The hasid is averse to my allocation. So as a summary, tonight we looked at these 5 questions. First of all, why should we place so much importance on looking at the stories of the prophets in the Quran? And we said that the answer is in Surah Yusuf, verse 111. That from these stories Allah tells us we gain ibrah, morals and lessons. The prophets are exemplars for us. We need to emulate them. We need to follow in their footsteps and ask ourselves, how can we be like them and not like those who are against them? Then in the second question, we were looking at Nabi Saleh and we spoke about how he was amongst the people and some basic facts about this great prophet. Then we looked at the third question, which was, what is the difference between hasad and ghibta on the one hand, and jealousy and envy on the other. Jealousy is when you have resentment and bitterness towards someone because of that possession, that thing that they have. Envy is just desiring that thing that they have. Hasad is when you want that thing to be removed from them, and ghibta is admiration for that quality that someone has. We should try and increase in our ghibta, not in our hasad, because ghibta is a sign of a mu'min, and hasad is a sign of a munafiq. Then the fourth question we looked at was, what are the effects of hasad on us? We said there are all of these effects: physical, psychological, spiritual, and even distorting reality itself. Just like the people of Saleh called him an arrogant liar, despite knowing how he was with his impeccable character before he started preaching to them about God's message. And finally, we looked at the 4 causes of hasad. They are things like feeling superior or having inferiority complex, hatred, and not understanding correctly Allah and His attributes. Inshallah, tomorrow we will continue our discussion and complete it as well. Let's pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, enable us. First of all, oh Allah, first and foremost prayer is that you hasten the appearance of the Imam. Oh Allah, enable us to remove all vices such as hasad from our hearts. Oh Allah, enable us to gain ibrah from the stories of the prophets mentioned in the Quran. Oh Allah, enable us to live and die according to the teachings of the Quran and Ahlul Bayt. Oh Allah, enable this center and all those people who frequent it to flourish in this world and the life hereafter. And oh Allah, make this not our last holy month of Ramadan. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Inshallah, we have the Maulana's lecture starting every day at 7:45, the question and answer sessions.